Over the course of the past year, COVID-19 has changed our world in so many different ways. As students, we have seen the effects that COVID has had on our campus, the staff, and our friends that make up Hope College. Sports were shut down, facilities seemingly abandoned, and social distancing and isolation made mandatory. These changes were drastic slashes to the programs that were the very reasons we came to Hope. Even so, these were not the hardest decisions for those in charge to make. Hence, we were compelled to learn more about the tough situations that our professors struggled with. We talked with one teacher from each learning format, these being asynchronous, in-person, and hybrid classes. Our conversation shed light on the immense impact that COVID had in the classroom and in their personal lives. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Could you please tell us all a little bit about yourselves?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm Professor Guillemiri and I teach in the Spanish section.
My name is Dr. Olufemi Oluviedun. I'm an assistant professor here at Hope College in the kinesiology department. My kind of background or what I'm focused on in my department is sports psychology, so I teach a few courses on that. I got my PhD at Michigan State University as well as my master's, both in sports psychology.
Normally organic 1 and 2, lecture and discussion, and lab.
Okay. And then how long have you been a professor at Hope?
This is my 17th year.
6 years. Yeah.
In addition to our amazing crew of teachers, we also had Jeffrey Petson of the steering committee. Mr. Petson, could you outline what the steering committee is and how you picked its members?
Sure. So the steering committee really was formed as a group to deliberately think about COVID and operations of the college. It became clear to us that this was going to be not a project that didn't fall neatly into like anybody's area. There's a health component to it, but obviously it's going to affect student life. So there's that component. There's an operations component. There's a finance component. All these things. So we needed folks who could. We didn't necessarily need folks from all those areas, but we needed folks who were willing to sort of think across all those areas and realize that a decision made is going to impact all of those areas. And so. Again, in some cases, we brought folks in, like we have somebody from residence life on the committee. Communication is a big one, so we have from communication. You know, we had a sort of some folks with some skills, but really it was just folks who, weren't afraid of whatever was coming.
These members were certainly dealing with incredibly tough problems, as any and all decisions had to answer this question.
Are we creating a dangerous situation, like a physically dangerous situation? You had a good idea, and of course we were educated on it. We had the experts, but at the end of the day, nobody was willing to tell you what was going to happen in 3 months because nobody knew what was going to happen.
Throughout this pandemic, individuals on Hope's campus have altered the ways they communicate with their coworkers, friends, and classmates. Individuals have had to find ways in order to stay in touch while also remaining socially distanced. And with that has come the high use of technology. In order to communicate and remain in touch with other individuals, many have turned to email, text, and meetings to ask questions or to even just catch up with one another. Some professors now even offer online office hours in order to still give that option to students, but also remain safe. This pandemic has proven that many rely heavily on technology to keep the interpersonal relationships they have with others.
What about your staff relationships or just your friendly coworkers? How has that changed?
Yeah, it has changed a lot too. So we would usually see each other in the hallway, say hi, or like talk about certain things or ask a question, like a quick question, right? Run to someone's office. I have a quick question. Now it's an email. Now it's a meeting. So everything is taking a lot more time. But yeah, not seeing my colleagues is not very easy too. So I miss seeing them. I miss running into each other. And now it has to be a long email. How is everything going, right? I hope life is going well and so on and so forth. But I'm glad that some people still keep in touch, although we don't see each other. And hopefully we will be able to be together again soon.
As many classes have turned online, understanding nonverbal cues and recognizing them have become more challenging for both those teaching and for the students interacting with one another. A barrier has been created with professors and students with other students when it comes to the use of nonverbal communication. With students on a small screen, it has become more difficult for professors to see the ways in which students may be expressing their thoughts and their emotions. So like you said, a lot of times actually technology students can be more engaged, but it's also a little more difficult to communicate and understand while on Zoom. So in what ways have you seen it affect nonverbals? Because a lot of times communication can be so important through your nonverbals. So how have you seen this on Zoom and overall just on like Google Meets or whatnot?
Yeah, you're very right. It definitely affects how students are talking to each other. No nonverbal clues, right? We don't have those on Zoom, and so sometimes when I would send students to work in groups in breakout rooms, I'd go and there is this awkward silence, and no one wants to start talking. Just kind of guiding students through every step has been something that has helped, and having very specific questions. What I like about Zoom is that you can give specific questions and specific time frame for students to go and do the work. And again, I have had very positive experience with my students, so I only have good things to say. But I understand that it is hard for students too. And you know what? We're human. Some days we just don't feel like talking, right? And so I just want to sit here and not talk. I just want to hear and listen what other people have to say. So not having that, not being able to express that in nonverbal ways, it's difficult for students. So some people are like, well, this person doesn't want to talk to me. How am I going to complete this activity, right? But just again, asking students to write in chat if they have something to say in case they don't want to speak, that has helped as well. But we do what we can, so.
In addition to the barrier that has come with the use of online schooling, masks have also made it difficult to understand nonverbal cues in public. One's mouth is a large component in signaling nonverbals, but when it is covered by a mask, it is extremely difficult to read and understand what one may be communicating. This lack of nonverbals can create misunderstandings or even miscommunications. After 1 year of wearing masks, many have begun to express their nonverbals in different ways or even understand nonverbals better. As over half of the world's schools shut down completely due to the pandemic, many turned to technology to save education. Technology has become a huge part of both learning and teaching for those in school. Students and professors have gotten used to using Zoom, Google Meets, and Microsoft Teams as a main form of communication for teaching and learning. These platforms allow for a productive space to meet, learn, and teach despite the changes that COVID brought to the classroom. This use of technology has proven to be extremely efficient and effective. It has allowed for safe spaces without having the worry of spreading the coronavirus. Without these forms of technology, teaching and learning would have been nearly impossible given the circumstances of COVID-19. Not only has technology allowed for a safe space, it has also allowed for new relationships to form and for old ones to remain. As great as the use of technology has been, there have also been some significant negative effects that a technology-based learning environment has influenced on students of all ages. According to the authors of the study, dataset of Jordanian university students' psychological health impacted by using e-learning tools during COVID-19, that students shifting to e-learning models led to the prolonged use of digital e-learning tools, including smartphones, laptops, and iPad tablets. This shift ultimately affected students' overall mental health and their psychological well-being. Their study focused on the impact of the excessive use of COVID-19's e-learning digital tools on university students' psychological and mental health.
In addition to the technological effects of COVID-19, the way that people form connections and interact has changed so much due to the pandemic. Interpersonal communication is defined as the process of the exchange of information, feelings, and ideas between two or more people through verbal and nonverbal methods. This often includes face-to-face exchange of information in the form of voice, facial expressions, body language, and gestures. Due to interpersonal relationships mostly relying on face-to-face interaction, they are greatly affected by the pandemic. Students and professors were no longer allowed to interact with each other face-to-face due to the risk of spreading COVID-19 to one another. This has almost completely eliminated the opportunity for people to interact in a form of voice, facial expressions, body language, and gestures on a normal basis. Due to this, there was much less connection being made between students and professors due to online learning. There was no more chatting before or after class, and students were less apt to make small talk while on Zoom rather than they would be sitting in a classroom at a desk. Nonverbals have become a challenge to read and pick up over Zoom and through masks.
One small thing that I really miss during these times is going into the classroom and trying to get ready for class, playing a little music and talking to students about their lives, just chit-chatting with students and getting to know them in person better. And so last semester I had to do in-person meetings for students who would like to meet and get to know each other. And so again, right, it's a little more mindful, a little more, what's the word that I'm looking for? But yeah, it's a little more planning. So I really miss that spontaneity in the classroom.
One of Hope College's most prominent features is the fact that professors and faculty care about their students and want to know them as more than a student. However, this characteristic of Hope College was greatly challenged this year because in order to create interpersonal relationships with others, there has to be familiarity and comfortability between two people. Masks, Zoom lectures, and lecture recordings limited and sometimes destroyed the opportunity for students and professors to create familiarity and comfortability with one another. Dynamic tensions required for communication were much harder to establish this year. Professors saw that their students felt more distant just because they aren't making the same connections with their professors as they would during a normal school year.
It's just a little harder on everyone. Students are a little more, a little more distant. And there is the same thing that we see out in the world of some people are, they've just decided where they're going to let their guard down a little bit. And hey, you guys are really just too close, but it's a choice. People have made that choice that no, with this small group of people, I'm just going to be a little more lax.
Despite all of the negatives and challenges that COVID has brought to our campus this year, there have also been some good things to come out of the online classes and how people are creating meaningful experiences and connections with one another. When looking at the journal article, COVID-19, Pandemic and Online Learning, The Challenges and Opportunities, the author is able to bring the challenges and opportunities together that the pandemic has brought us to conclude that despite the challenges, some parts of online learning will be sustained and education will become more hybrid due to the challenges of technology and communication as being resolvable and therefore a better way of teaching students.
Have had more students coming to office hours than I would in a normal time. So that has been encouraging to see that students are active agents and they're trying to learn as much as they can, even during these difficult times.
Through the ways that professors have had to change the way they teach, they have found better ways to mentor and teach their students than before the pandemic.
There's some context in which it was always in person and people would just be like, well, it can't not be done in person, right? Like conferences. So there's a couple conferences that I was a part of this year where generally they're in person, you travel somewhere, you're staying in a hotel, you're presenting on a day. We're not doing that now, right? So it's required people to identify, okay, can we still host a conference in a virtual format, but make it as similar to an in-person format as possible? It's the same thing for teaching. So, I think before the thought was, you have to be in class, to be able to learn the content. Well, now we're seeing you probably have people that maybe aren't comfortable with, let's say they can't come to class for some reason. They can get a recorded lecture. They can they can join synchronously if they want. And that can be helpful for some where maybe when it's in person and I just speak and then we leave class, you maybe don't have a good idea. You're not able to rewatch the lecture because it was in person. Now you can, if it's recorded, you can listen to it as many times as you want, as slow as you want, right? I think that's been pretty nice. And is a huge positive that I think students are like, hey, if I'm really trying to learn things for the long term, the delivery can be altered so that I actually can do so.
Every Friday in my classes, this is something that I started doing during the pandemic. So last fall I started doing it, but every Friday is a mental health Friday or like check-in Friday. And so we just sit down and talk to each other for like 5 minutes, make sure everyone is okay, make sure we support someone who needs support that day, or just vent. You know, we're humans, we can vent. Sometimes we're allowed to do that as well. So that has been the practice that I started this pandemic, and I thought it has been effective. I think students appreciate it. I have gotten feedback from students, and they enjoy having this kind of a little bit of a community building and seeing each other as people that are going through something difficult in different ways, but together.
A big source of hope and joy at Hope College this year was just being able to be on campus with everyone together. Even professors saw a difference in their students since moving back to campus compared to the online learning version of learning that we saw in spring of 2020.
I would say that in some ways less than I thought. In some ways, you know, I think at least first semester you guys are doing pretty well. Like there was some tentativeness and some angst, but really also a lot of relief, right? After having been chased off campus the end of last school year, just the idea of being back was, it seemed, was very motivating to students, very like helped them do the right thing with response to COVID, but also just they were grateful to be there. And I think that's good. I think it's a good reminder that being at Hope College is a huge privilege.
Just as seen in the journal article, Quarantine, Distress, and Interpersonal Relationships During COVID-19 by Goodwin, not all relationships were damaged or got worse. Some even flourished and got better due to the circumstances of the pandemic. Students are no longer spreading themselves too thin and making a lot of shallow connections, but instead they're focusing on a small, central group of people, which has ultimately led to a positive feeling and a stronger sense of community. Some of the relationships that are being made are all in all deeper and more meaningful than before.
Yeah, one that was good and bad is some students I think are really lonely right now, but other students I think are maybe less lonely. And it was a weird answer that I got from the student, but that having to focus in on a core group of friends and a core group of activities and let some other things go meant that they weren't so crazy busy all the time, and they were able to go deeper with the people that they decided to do life with than feeling like they had to have, 3,000 friends on campus and get pulled in 18 million directions.
The focused purpose that has come from forming connections during COVID has been a huge positive, especially in the classroom setting. Professors and students are making time and becoming more aware of other people and how they are doing during this hard time. This awareness has opened up a lot of opportunities for people to form connection, more so than they might have before.
Students have shown me that they can make the best of their situation, which is really important. I think, to be honest, we didn't appreciate a lot of things before the pandemic that now we're like,
Hope is different. Hope students and faculty are different. However, even though we have all experienced a new hardship, we have proven that we are capable of caring for our community through it all, while still pursuing the same values that Hope has always been about.
About my students, I have learned, I knew this was not news to me. I always say this, Hope students are different. Hope students are really good. But I've learned that Hope students have so much energy and so much resilience and tenacity that I'm surprised and happy and encouraged by it. And I really hope that this is not just during the pandemic, that students continue showing up with so much positive attitude toward their class, their learning, their communities. I really hope that they continue doing so.
Through this entire process and journey of COVID-19 and being a college student trying to get through a global pandemic, it can be seen that Hope College is still Hope College. We got through this and are getting through this together. Hope is a community that helps each other and lifts each other up, even amidst the most unfortunate of circumstances. Hope College, as a community, had decided that we were going to push through this time together and come out the other end better off than before. If we hadn't put all the effort in to help each other and communicate hope in our everyday lives, we wouldn't be where we are today.